תודה רבה למאיר, גם למוטי ולעמל. אני תמיד שמח מאוד על החיבור הזה שבין מחקרי שלום למחקרי ביטחון לאומי וגם הנושא של חינוך לדו-קיום יהודי ערבי, כי כל אלה בסופו של דבר קשורים וכרוכים זה בזה בחיינו, ואם הם לא מתגשמים באמת במציאות אז לפחות טוב שזה קורה כאן בשיתוף פעולה שמתקיים בין הגופים. מוטי הזכיר את שיתוף הפעולה החשוב שיש לנו עם ח'ליל שקאקי, שזו גם נקודת אור ביחסים בינינו לבין השכנים הפלסטינים, וערב העיון הזה שבנינו כאן יחד מאפשר לנו, כך אני מאמין, לקיים דיון מעמיק ורציני בנושא שהוא כל כך חשוב ומרכזי בחיינו, ולא במקרה העולם הזה מלא עד אפס מקום, ותודה לכל מי שהגיע. אני רוצה לומר רק כמה מילים ממש בקצרה על שני הפרויקטים של סקרי דעת קהל שנציג במושב הזה. משאל עמים הוא פרויקט ישראלי-פלסטיני משותף, רב שנתי. הפרויקט הזה מיועד לבחון מצד אחד את העמדות של הישראלים, כולל ערבים ומתנחלים, ומצד שני את העמדות של הפלסטינים בגדה המערבית וגם ברצועת עזה, בעיקר ביחס לפתרון של שתי מדינות, כשהמטרה היא לברר באמצעות שאלות ותמריצים שונים מה עשוי להגביר את הנכונות לפשרות שנדרשות מכל צד בסוגיות הקבע הרגישות. והתהליך הזה, תהליך הבירור, מתאפשר בגלל העובדה שזה סקר מתגלגל שנערך בו זמנית בישראל וברשות הפלסטינית אחת לחצי שנה, וזה מאפשר לנו בעצם לכוון בכל פעם את השאלות ביחס לתשובות שהתקבלו בסקר הקודם, ולהציע לכל צד תמריצים שעשויים להגביר את התמיכה בפתרון המדיני. משלושה סקרים שכבר נערכו בשנה האחרונה בישראל ובצד הפלסטיני, הדברים הולכים ומתבררים, ואפשר כבר להצביע על סוגים של תמריצים שעשויים להגביר את התמיכה בכל צד בפתרון הזה, ואת הדברים האלה אנחנו תכף נשמע. ההנחה היא שאם המנהיגים בשני הצדדים ידעו בסופו של דבר באיזה תנאים של הסדר הם יכולים לצפות שתהיה להם תמיכה גדולה יותר בדעת הקהל, בציבור שלהם, הם יוכלו לקבל החלטות מתאימות, נקרא לזה כך, בתהליך המדיני, כמובן אם רק ירצו בכך. מטעמנו, מטעם מרכז תמי שטיינמיץ, מנצחת על הפרויקט דוקטור דליה שיינדלין, שהיא מומחית, בעלת שם, אני יכול לומר, בינלאומי בתחום, והשותף שלנו שגם יזם את הפרויקט הוא דוקטור ח'ליל שקאקי, ראש המרכז הפלסטיני למדיניות ולחקר דעת קהל שיושב ברמאללה, שגם הוא מומחה גדול ובעל ניסיון ומוניטין רב בתחום. פרויקט הסקרים השני הוא הפרויקט של המכון, התוכנית לחקר דעת קהל וביטחון לאומי. בראש התוכנית עומדת דוקטור ציפי ישראלי. הסקרים האלה נערכים מדי שנה בקרב יהודים וערבים בישראל, במגוון נושאים שביניהם גם הנושא הזה של הסכסוך הישראלי-פלסטיני, והממצאים מתפרסמים במסגרת מדד הביטחון הלאומי. באופן מפתיע או לא, הסקרים של המכון ושל משאל עמים, כפי שתכף נראה, מראים שלמרות שישנה ירידה בתמיכה הציבורית בשני הצדדים בפתרון של שתי מדינות, עדיין ישנו רוב שתומך בפתרון הזה, ובמיוחד ובאופן מובהק ביותר בקרב הערבים בישראל. במושב השני והשלישי, כפי שמאיר כבר הסביר, אנחנו נדון בממצאים, במשמעויות של הממצאים האלה, מבחינת דעת הקהל, בכל מה שנוגע לחידוש התהליך המדיני והתייחסות המנהיגים לסוגיות האלה, בכל מה שנוגע לדעת הקהל בציבורים שלהם. אני מתכבד להזמין את דוקטור ח'ליל שקאקי להציג את הממצאים של שלושת הסקרים האחרונים שנערכו בשנה האחרונה. בבקשה, please. Maybe, yeah. Yes. This is not easy.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. My presentation today is about what Palestinians think about compromise. Essentially, what I am trying to present are findings of 3 surveys that have been recently conducted, as Modi indicated, with the support of the EU and others, in fact. The Dutch have also been supporting us. And the title I gave to my presentation is the extent to which the current opposition that we see, what I call the hardening of attitudes among Palestinians, whether this is a solid shift in attitudes or whether it is reversible. So what I will be presenting is the answer to this question, and you'll be the judge of whether, in fact, what we see in terms of hardening is or is not reversible. Just a few words about our methodology. These are indeed 3 surveys covering the period starting in June 16. Sample size in each one is about 1,200 to 1,270. These are all face-to-face interviews, and the areas we cover are just the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. The margin of error is 3%. So how do we know that there is hardening of attitudes and views among Palestinians? Well, support for the 2-state solution has declined considerably during the last decade, and you can see that. It started in 2006, right after the end of the Second Intifada, with 71% support for the cornerstone of the peace process, the 2-state solution. And there were times in which it declined considerably to 44%. This was as recent as December 16, less than a year ago. And it has went up a little bit. So we are today about 50-50, slightly more than that. Clearly, then, we do have a problem with the hardening of Palestinian views, rejection of the 2-state solution. Why has that happened? Well, one notion we have been addressing is the question of viability, that people think that is not viable. So if you think something is not viable, you start looking for alternatives to it. And here we have clear evidence that most Palestinians believe that the 2-state solution is no longer viable. And clearly, there is a link between that and the support for the 2-state solution. And you can see it here. This is about the viability. And this is just from the most recent survey. But the recent survey, well, it doesn't show the worst of the period we've covered or the previous periods before that. But it certainly shows what I'm talking about. As you can see, when we asked people whether the 2-state solution is viable, most Palestinians, in this case 52%, said no, it is not. 44% said it was. But when we asked them about the next 5 years, whether a Palestinian state will be created, in the next 5 years, a state alongside the state of Israel, 71% said the chances are non-existence, well, low to non-existence. So most Palestinians, therefore, seem to think that this is a very low probability. This slide shows you the link between viability and support. So if you believe that, right here, if you believe that it is no longer viable, then you support it by only 1/3. But if you think it is viable, you support it by more than 3/4. So clearly, there is a link between the two. Let's put all of this in some sort of a context. Support for the 2-state solution, I have just said, has declined by about 30%. the absence of viability, the only reason, so far I've only shown that. But is it the only reason for the decline in support for the two-state solution? The answer is no, it is not. Indeed, some views have changed. When you think a two-state solution is not viable, you turn to something else, something like a one-state solution, for example. And we have evidence of that. It increased from 8 to 11%. Now, this, of course, needs explanation. In our most recent survey, more than a third of the Palestinians actually supported the one-state solution, and not just 11%. True, but if you omit all those who support the two-state solution out of that, you end up with only 11% today. So if you combine those who also support the two-state solution, then you get a third or more. So there has been an increase. An estimate of that is about 25%, but the more serious change has been towards hardening of views, to extreme views. In a minute, I'll illustrate that. That has increased from 21% to 36%. That's an increase by about 70%. That is also an estimate. We can talk later about why this is an estimate and not a solid figure. This is my topic then. Is this change that we see, the hardening, both the change to one-state support and the hardening of attitudes, which I'll illustrate in a minute, is this reversible? So let's first look at, well, this is an answer for you right now. The answer is yes, it is reversible, but in order to do that, we need to come up with the right incentives. What we have been trying to do, the Palestinian and Israeli researchers, for the last year is to do exactly that, to do experiments essentially. We've done 3 so far. These experiments aim at exploring this idea of the extent to which we can reverse attitudes. And Dalia and I will be showing some of this. Okay, this is the two-state solution. This is the picture for today, essentially. And the comparison is with March 06. For the two-state solution, it is declined. For the one-state, it increased. For these 3 other alternatives, support for apartheid, this is support for apartheid among Palestinians, where Palestinians are in control. Expulsion, it's not Israelis expelling Palestinians, Palestinians expelling Jews. So that's also an extreme view. Other, well, we're including this, we're assuming this is extreme views. We're somehow excluding from extreme views only these 2. Those who think a two-state and those who think a one-state with equal rights. These are not extreme views according to the slide you are seeing in front of you. Okay. What else at work then? I have included viability, and it is indeed an important factor, but as I indicated earlier, this is not the only reason. What else? Well, we have a lot of things. There has been an increase in threat perception. During the period in question, there were 3 wars in Gaza, and conditions in the West Bank. There were a lot of clashes in the West Bank as well, not as much as it was in Gaza, but so that increased threat perception. When we think about these wars, we only think about the destruction, physical destruction, people dying, etc. But in fact, there's also been another kind of destruction, and that is the destruction to the psychological environment, the one that supported willingness to compromise. This has been affected considerably. Distrust is also very destructive. Fear, misperception, etc. Here is a slide about threat. For those, and these are 2 slides put together. This is how Palestinians view Israel's aspirations, and this is how Palestinians view their own, their PLO and the PA aspirations. The red is the worst kind, the most extreme kind of aspiration. The gray is as bad, slightly less so. And as you can see, when Palestinians think of Israel, they, close to 80%, think of the worst. So 80% of the Palestinians think Israel has very extreme, very threatening. In fact, Israel poses, according to 80% of the Palestinians, today, this is today, an existential threat. The first slide is about Israel annexing all Palestinian land and expelling all Palestinians. The next one, the one in gray, is about Israel annexing the land and denying Palestinians their political and civil rights. So these are two existential threats to Palestinians. These two other aspirations of Israel are more moderate. All it wants is security, and if it gets security, it pulls out and it withdraws from the occupied territories, all of it or part of it. Okay, now look at how Palestinians view their own aspirations. Using the same exact set of aspirations, only 11% think the Palestinians, the PLO aspiration is to take over or destroy the Jewish state. So this we consider to be equal to this. Only 13% think the goal is to take over 48 Israel. 19% think it is to take all the land, and 42% plurality think it's to regain all the land occupied in 1967. And the plurality, 42% think it's to regain part of the land occupied in 1967. So Palestinians think of themselves as being moderates, think of Israel's long-term aspirations to be extreme. That is one reason. Why is this one reason? Well, I don't have a slide right now to show you. We find very strong correlation between each one of those columns and the attitudes regarding compromise. If you think Israel's aspirations are extreme, your support for compromise is very low. If you think Israel's aspirations are moderate, your support for compromise is very high. This is about Palestinian view of Israelis. I didn't select the worst. One I could not avoid, the question of trust. As you can see, most Palestinians, well, very few Palestinians trust Israelis. So most Palestinians think Israelis are not trustworthy. Do they fear them? Well, to a large extent. Remember, this is about Israelis. This is about Israeli civilians. This is not a question about fear of Israeli army or armed settlers. If that was the case, the percentage would be much higher. I only selected this because we have data from the three waves that we've conducted so far. Do Israelis support the two-state solution? Well, about a third. A large minority believe Israelis do, but the majority believes the Israelis do not support the two-state solution. Do the Israelis want peace? A slightly brighter picture. Still, a majority does not believe that the Israelis want peace. So that is the picture. This is the psychological environment that affects the attitudes we are looking at, which is the willingness to compromise. But now we come, so this is essentially in a way of presenting what we are trying to do. We will realize these are the attitudes. They are hardening. We know why they're hardening. All these factors are extremely relevant to why they're hardening, even though I have not shown you the slides for everything, because I wanted to focus here on the experiments, the three experiments that we have done. The experiment starts essentially with offering Palestinians something concrete, and the Israelis, of course. Dalia will be addressing that. But it's not just a concept, but actually a very concrete package that resolves the conflict. And we ask about each of those. What you see in front of you are 5 topics: the end of conflict and the mutual recognition of each other, security arrangements, including a demilitarized Palestinian state, territorial issues, 6 to 7 lines, plus equal territorial exchange, Jerusalem addressed in two issues as two capitals, and with divided sovereignty over in the old city. Refugees, we have a right of return to the homeland. This is the term we use we borrowed that from the Clinton parameters. But only 100,000 refugees would be able to return to Israel, and only as part of family unification. So this is the package that we have presented the Palestinians. What we wanted to know is what you're going to see right now is not all that important, right here, is not that important in terms of assessing the reversibility. This is the base. What you can see, but I'm showing you this, it basically shows consistency. There is a little bit of increase in Gaza, but overall attitudes, particularly in the West Bank, really have changed a little. They have not declined, maybe increased slightly, but overall, when we offered this package 3 times during the last 12 months or so, more than 12 months, we essentially received the same answer. A majority of Palestinians opposed the package. Somewhere between 55 to 60% of the Palestinians said no to the package, which is what we expected, based on the hardening of views that we have seen evident before then. When we look at the particular issues, we can see where the difficulties are. But again, as if I'm showing you the 3 waves, and the reason I'm showing you the 3 waves is because I wanted you to show the consistency. Things actually have not changed much, with the exception of this one right here, the refugees. There has been somewhat of an increase, and there has been somewhat of an increase with the mutual recognition as well. Other than that, things have essentially remained unchanged. This is another way of seeing the hardening of attitudes, where things are today. This is from June of this year. Only one issue received majority support. This summarizes the slide I showed you earlier. 50-50 support for just one issue, a large minority for just one issue. Everything else, the 9 other issues received 1/3 or less. In fact, 3 of those around 1/4. Now, when we look at the particular constituencies, we can see that the West Bank tended to be more hardline than Gaza, and we assume that this has to do with the miserable conditions in Gaza. Gazans just want to get out of the miserable conditions. They support peace compromise, and compromise more than the West Bank. We did not see much, any important differences between refugees and non-refugees. We know that the religious people among Palestinians tend to be less supportive, and we know that Hamas does not support the package, but the most important thing is that secular nationalists tend to be more willing to support the compromises than the Islamists. Okay. How do we test for the extent to which people are willing to reverse their views? Well, we offer them incentives, what we call incentives. These incentives are sort of ways in which we hope we can bring these various constituencies, including the hardline constituencies, into the process or the willingness to compromise. What we are trying to do, therefore, is to test the extent to which their rejection of compromise is solid, ideological. So we come up with various incentives. Some of the incentives are tangible incentives. They are about financial compensation, some or otherwise. Some are more intangible. An intangible, a statement, for example, issued by Israel would be an intangible incentive. Some of the incentives you'll see in a minute are zero-sum incentives. That is something that the Israelis would reject. And if this is part of the package, it would reduce support among the Israelis. Some are zero-sum. So they are things that should not, in theory, bring down the support on the other side. Some actually are win-win. Some are good for both sides. So we kept in mind that we wanted all types of incentives. Okay, so this, I don't know whether you can see it back there, but these are 17 incentives. We actually tested more than 17. I'm giving you only the good incentives, good in this case, because this is an experiment, where the experiment sort of succeeded. So these are actually gave us more than 40% change. What kind of change are we talking about? Well, these incentives were not offered to Palestinians who said, yes, we accept the package. These were offered only to those who said, no, we don't. So we're now looking at those who have hardened their attitudes. And we are essentially asking them whether they would be willing to change their mind and accept that same exact package I presented earlier that they have already rejected. So we are basically saying, okay, on top of that, in addition to what's in the package that we have presented you, we would like, for example, to add this. The one that received the greatest level of, the one that proved to be the most effective, is the one whereby Israel releases all Palestinian prisoners. Now, any peace agreement will include that. There's no doubt about it. We are not adding any surprises here, but it was not in the package. So we wanted to see whether, in fact, people assumed that it wasn't. It would not automatically mean, peace would not automatically mean that prisoners would be released. And in fact, we were shocked when the change was so dramatic. So assume that we're talking about 60% rejection. That's more than 30%. But we already have 40% or more. If you add that, the change, that gives you more than 70% support. Now, of course, it's not that automatic, but what we are after is to see this 60% for what it is, how hardline it is. And this is just one single incentive. So we have 6 incentives in which we have received. This, of course, is tangible. The next one, the laborers, the Palestinian laborers continue to work in Israel, was also highly effective. The acknowledgement of historic religious roots of Palestinians in historic Palestine is an intangible incentive. And as you can see, it was as effective as some of the others over here.
Can you explain again the numbers? Like, what is the 56%?
This is 56% of those who said no. So 56% of 60%. 60% said no.
And now they said yes.
56% of them now say yes to the package. So if the package includes this item or that item or any of those, that's how much change you get in the opposition. So the experiment is essentially done only with those who have hardened their views. So, right, I'm about to finish. You have, so I've divided them into 3 groups, the large minority up to, in this case, more than 50%. About a third, for example, 34% would change their mind and accept the package if Marwan Barghouthi supports the package. If Israel acknowledges responsibility for the refugee problem. If Israel is to issue an apology for the suffering. If Israel is to change its own textbooks and removes incitement against Palestinians. If Palestine is offered to join the EU, etc. And then there's the quarter or more, a Palestinian-Jordanian confederation. This is one of the win-win that I've talked about. Peace with Arab states, that's regional peace, that's again win-win. A joint Palestinian-Israeli economic venture, that is also win-win. So those also are highly effective when a quarter or more of the rejectionists, those who've hardened their views, change their mind and support that original package we're talking about. Okay, you can see this now in a different way, but this is essentially what I've shown you earlier. These are just from June, so they do not include all the 17 that I've mentioned earlier. They only include, 7 or so. And you can see this is the one that has the prisoners. And you can see even Hamas, look at this, 50% of Hamas voters were willing to accept the package if prisoners are released. So even among Hamas voters, rejection of the package was not ideological. They are willing to change their mind and embrace it if prisoners are released. Obviously, the Barouth is also an important factor. Regional peace is in fact effective in all cases. The least effective would be with Hamas voters, but all others seem to think it would be a very good idea and they are willing to change their mind. Remember this, we're not asking all Palestinians, in this case, we're only asking those who said no to the package. So these are the hardcore of opposition among Palestinians.
Presented with all those incentives?
Indeed, they are all presented with all the incentives. Now, if we actually look, since you asked, so if you look at how the whole 60% responded to every single incentive and combine them, which we have done, you can actually get all the way up to 80% support. Sorry?
Get them to vote big.
All right. Okay, so I presented you with incentives as a way of changing attitudes, and since I only now have about 3 minutes or so, I'll hurry up, which is essentially where I was heading. Hurrying up is what else can be done. Well, there's something that is called soft power. In a minute I'll explain what that is, that can actually be effective. This depends on what Israelis do. And there is the power of believing in the two-state solution. And that, I think, is also something that, this second one is more about the viability. The more people are convinced it's viable, then they are likely to support it. So I've already talked about this. As you can see, if Palestinians think Israelis want peace, well, the support jumps to 59%. If they think if they trust Israelis, it goes all the way up to 61%. If they think Israel is not a threat, it goes up to 56%, and so on and so forth. That is Israel's soft power. This is how Israel presents itself to the Palestinians, and how Palestinians then view it. This is about the power of the two-state solution. If you support the two-state solution, if you definitely support it, you support the package, the original package, without any of the incentives, by 81% or by 63% if you support it. Okay, so this is my last slide. Just 1 minute. These are my conclusions. Public opinion, well, is not a force for peace, but it's not an impediment to peace. If Abbas and Netanyahu are to reach an agreement today, they can bring the Palestinian public along with them. There is no doubt that they have to be creative and use some of the incentives we are proposing. I assume they would. Then the public opinion definitely is not an impediment. Viability is very important. We need to convince Palestinians that the two-state solution is still viable. Support for the two-state solution is also important because it means more willingness to compromise. If you support the concept, incentives are very important, tangible and intangible. Work, prisoners, and recognition of identity seems to be important, and soft power is important. Thank you very much.